Okay, in this tutorial we're going to introduce the 3D printer, and we're going to do so by actually printing out the object that we made in the previous lesson. Okay, now we're going to introduce a new program here. This is the Makerbot Desktop. This program is designed specifically to work with the 3D printer, which is made by Makerbot. It's company specific, so any other 3D printer would probably have a similar program that works. Now, the way you look at this is like a fish tank. Whatever you can put onto this pad can be printed. It can only be so tall and it can only be so big. So essentially, this is your transporter pad from the enterprise. So the first thing you do is we're going to load our STL. So we go to Add File, and there's our tower logo print. And you'll notice that it's going to ask me to rescale the object because it thinks it's too small. So we're going to head and rescale it. And what that's going to do is it's going to convert units from one to another. So it jumps a few steps. So there it is. So then if we go over here, these are our main operations. So for example, this is a scale feature. This will allow you to scale the object into whatever size that you want it to be. Over here we've got rotate, and that's what we'll do first. We're going to rotate that first on the y-axis 90 degrees. That will get it straight up and down. Now of course when you do that you'll see that it's below the level of the pad, which obviously it can't be. So I'm going to hit the lay flat button, and there we are. And finally I'm going to rotate that on the z-axis, and immediately we see that we suddenly have a deal breaker. Notice that the Methodist University is backwards. So if I were to hit the I button there and sort of go around there, clearly we're going backwards. So I'm going to recenter it, and that's a deal breaker. So we're going to just delete that object, and we're going to go back to Modeler. So here in Modeler, here again, we've got our Methodist University logo, and it looks correct. So what we're going to do is we're going to reverse it here so it'll be correct when it goes into the other program. So we're just going to go to Modify and under Translate, and we're going to flip this on the y-axis. Then we're going to rotate it 180 degrees, and it's backwards. Then we're going to export it as an STL, and we're going to put that on the desktop, and I'm just going to call that logo print 2. And there it is. So now you see if we're back in the program here in Makerbot Desktop, and we basically add the file. We'll take our second version of that, rescale it, then we'll go over here and basically rotate it, lay it flat, and there you see Methodist University is correct. If we go back to scale for a minute, you can also see, first of all, you can make this any size you want, meaning that if this had to be exactly a certain height, you could put that in to basically 2 decimal places, and you can make that as exact as you want it. If it has to fit into something, for example, this is where you would do that. And I'm just going to choose maximum size though. That will print the biggest version of this that it can. And hypothetically, if I wanted that bigger, I might put it sideways and get some more size out of it, but that's perfectly alright. And of course, the bigger it is, the longer it's going to take to print. And the only other thing that we're going to talk about here are the settings. The settings are up here. And there's only a few settings that you really have to know. We stay in the high quality area preset. And if you look at infill density, if you choose 0 infill density, your object will be hollow on the inside, meaning that this is going to print it out of plastic. If it's got 0 infill, it will just make a shell. And that's great if you're doing a squeeze bottle or something that doesn't have to have any insides, or something that's going to be very lightweight. If you choose 100% infill density, you're going to get a solid piece of plastic that's very durable and relatively heavy. And so we're going to keep that at 20%, which will create a honeycomb pattern, which will give it a great deal of structural strength. But at the same time, it'll also have airspace, so it won't be quite so heavy and it won't be quite so strong. Now, if you go to where it says supports and bridging, I'm going to highly recommend that you don't use those. The only reason you would make supports is if you had elements of the object that were hanging out in space that couldn't be printed. If you're going to build something like this out of bricks, if you're building up and you have some part that comes out here, you can't just put bricks out into thin air. So you would have to have a scaffolding, and that's what these supports are for. But it makes a terrible mess when you finally print it out because you've got to cut those supports off later on. So we'll just leave it like this. And pretty much that's all you really have to know. Then you simply go and hit preview. You see this is the 3D printer preview window, and we can see this is what the 3D printer thinks it's going to be printing. And if you scroll through this, you can see the object from different angles. You also notice that it creates a small raft that the object will sit on, kind of like a pallet. And you can also look at the different layers. So if you scroll down there, it will show you what the printer is going to be doing at each layer of the print. And if you look closely, you can see the infill pattern. So if you zoom in by using the wheel mouse to wheel forward, you can see the infill patterns. Then once you're happy with the final project, just hit export. And we're just going to call this logo complete. And that's it. And that's the file that you will put into the 3D printer, either using a USB drive or running it to the computer that it's attached to. This is a 3D printer. It's actually quite small considering what it does. This device can print just about anything you can imagine out of plastic. As you can see, it's about the size of a large aquarium tank, but the actual build plate, as you see here, is quite small. This is where the actual object will be printed. It's very much like the transporter pad on the Enterprise. Whatever you print has to be able to fit onto this platform. If you have something very large, you might be able to print it in sections. This device here is the extruder. This gets incredibly hot as it melts the plastic and makes the item. This will move back and forth across the surface of the build plate as it's printing. This is the main control panel. Basically, it operates with one knob. Turning the knob left and right cycles through the menus. Pushing on any particular item will select it. The first thing we're going to do is choose a color. That means we go to the filament section. If you want to see what color is in the printer at the time, simply look at the very back of the system right above the build plate, and you will see the line of filament that's available. In this case, it's blue. As you can see, we have a selection of colors to choose from. You'll notice that the plastic used in printing comes in strings. It looks very much like the string used in garden trimmers, but the string is actually melted at high temperature and formed into other shapes. To change the filament, you must first unload the filament that's currently in there. To do that, we'll navigate to the filament section and push in on the button. Now we get a submenu. We can unload filament or load filament. In this case, we're going to keep it on unload. You'll see that the device has to first heat up the filament in order to release it. It will heat the filament to 215 degrees Celsius. That's over 2 times the boiling point of water. Then it will signal you to wait as it ejects the filament. The filament spool is in the back of the unit. To access this, you must push down on the lever and pull up. The unit will lock into place. turn the filament clockwise to remove the old filament. You must completely empty the filament straw. Then squeeze the release catch in and pull the filament from the unit. The first thing to do is to put the filament onto the spool. Be careful to hold the end of the filament. Don't let it unravel. If it gets tangled, it will jam. Make sure to free the straw. Very carefully thread the filament into the straw. Keep threading it in until it comes out the other end. When you have done this, take the other end and pull it taut. Then hold the spool, push the lever, and gently lower the cassette down. Now, continue. You're going to want to load the filament. If the unit cooled off while you are unloading the filament, it will have to reheat itself. The unit will now ask you to thread the filament. Basically, you put the filament into the hole. You have to work it in until you feel it begin to grab. You should see filament extruding. When you do, hit the button. Now that you are ready to print, hit the back button and select Print. In this particular case, we'll load our file from a thumb drive. As you can see, the model is available on the menu and you can see a picture of it. Pushing the button now will select the model. It will tell you how long it will take to print and whatever else you might want to know. We'll go ahead and print. You'll notice the extruder moving into position, and the table will begin to rise to meet the extruder. When the extruder has achieved optimal position, the system will heat up to the final temperature. It will begin by laying down some excess plastic, and then it will begin building the plate on which the object will stand. Okay, so you can see here that the 3D printer can be monitored using the desktop software. You can see that it's hard at work printing the item that we talked about, and you can see it'll even give you a reading on how much time is left, and either if you're accessing it remotely you can see this, or you can keep track of it on the desktop in the computer that's right next to the printer itself. This will take quite a while to print, but it will be worth the wait. And as you can see, here is our finished product down here. Printer has completed the object. You can see it down there. And all you got to do is basically peel it off the printer itself and clear off the raft, and you're all set.